So for the DaVinci Resolve 14 test, we used the free version of DaVinci Resolve, which is fully functional and gives us all the formats up to 4K. So for that test, we ran the standard candle benchmark. And that benchmark consists of 4 levels of blur nodes, all the way up to 66 blur nodes. On the Boxx system, we saw that all of the levels, the first 3 levels, ran at the full frame rate, and only the 66 node would not run at the full. I believe it ran at about 13 frames per second. And on the Mag system, the first level of 9 blur nodes ran at 24 frames a second, but all of the subsequent blur node levels ran below the full frame rate. And I believe at the 66 we saw a 3 frame per second. So right now we're in the DaVinci Resolve version 14 interface. This is the free version, which is fully featured, except for when you want to export footage over 4K. So we're running the standard candle test. We're in the color correction section of the program, and with the standard candle test, we have a piece of sample footage here that you run, and we're going to focus on these 4 different levels of blurs, which go from 9 to 66 on the nodes. And so let's set it to 9. We're going to load the 9. Oop, there we go. And play. And you can see up here that it's running at 24 frames a second. And so we're going to stop that. We're going to go down. We're going to choose 18. We're going to load that. We're going to play that. You can see that it also runs at 24 frames a second. And now let's load 30. Play that. And it is running at the full frame rate of 24 frames a second. And finally, the highest level, which is 66. And for this test, they want you to take the lowest frame rate, which would be 14. So at 66, this would be 14. The biggest thing impacting this test will be the GPU. Resolve uses some CPU, but the GPU is the primary thing being impacted in this test. That's going to be different on the Mac in that you're somewhat restricted to your GPU. Okay, now we're in DaVinci Resolve 14 on the Mac, which has an identical interface. We're running the standard candle test. So we're going to go up here and we're going to load the 9 blur nodes. We're going to run that and wait for our, and we can see that it'll run at 24 frames a second on the 9 blur nodes. So let's try 18 blur nodes. We'll load that up, come down and play. Now we'll wait to see what our frame rate goes to. So we need to take our lowest number, which would be 13. So right there we already see that it looks like it's stabilized at 14. So that our out of our 24 frames a second, we're between 13 and 14 frames on 18 blur nodes. So now let's see how we do with 30 blur nodes. And in this test, again, you want to take the lower of the 2 numbers, so it would be 8. And then remind you that it was running 24 on the Boxx system. So if we go to the 66, for this test and run that, you can see that we're really getting 3. And just to check something that was, this one has performance mode on. Let me double check and make sure this one didn't. There's one setting that I wanted to make sure. Let's take that off. All right. Let me run it again without performance mode to just see how, if anything changes. It's barely even running this without the performance mode on, so that 9 goes to 24. Yeah, I think we even get lower numbers here when we don't have our performance mode on. To 8. Approximately the same, but slightly lower. Boxx system, now that I have the performance mode turned off, we can see there is a slight difference in the performance on this one as well. At the 33 blur nodes, we still get our 24 frames a second, but we're not getting a green indicator. And then I'm getting 11 and 10 on the, to remind you, I was getting a 3 and a 4 on the Mac system with performance mode off.